In this video, we'll talk about exception and error handling. Well, inevitably, when we write our applications, we will always get some errors, right? Now, there are some errors that we know how to fix right away. For instance, if you forget to put a semicolon, if we say something like this, system.out, println, you've seen this many times, hello, and you forget to put semicolon and run, right? It says that we have this error here, and we can right away go ahead and fix it, right? Because we said unresolved compilation problem, syntax error, insert semicolon to complete block statements. Okay. So what we can do, of course, we can go ahead and put a semicolon, save, and run again, and we should see hello. So there's those errors that we can handle right away. The other error we can get, for instance, is if we create, let's say, an array, let's say string, my array, and we're going to create an array here. Let's put hello, okay, hi, James. A very random one, but nonetheless will work. And if we say system.out.println, and we say we want to print my array, and we're going to pass in index 3. All right, and let's save this. As you can see, as we save, there was no errors. Let's go and run, and we have a problem, right? We have this array index out of bounds exception. So this is caught on a runtime as the Java virtual machine goes through the process of creating the class and creating the bytecode and decoding everything, and then run the instruction. It then realizes, nope, there is no such thing as index 3. Why? Well, because our array here only has 3 items, which means we only have up to index number 2, because this is index 0, index 1, index 2. So here, what we're doing, we're asking for the third index, which is not possible to reach. Well, simply because it doesn't exist. Those are errors that happen on runtime, and we have these exceptions that are thrown, as we say in Java. They're thrown to say, hey, something is really bad here. This can happen. And you notice there's also names, right? This one is called array index out of bound exception. That's the name. What we're trying to do here is to make sure, and when we write our programs, we have a way to avoid certain errors that we cannot really know beforehand that could occur, right? For instance, let me get rid of this. By the way, you notice we are in the error handling project. I created this before I started recording. So by now you know how to create a project. So go ahead and create a project such as this. So coming back, let's get rid of this. Let's say we have an app that takes arguments, so takes data from input and shows the sum. So a little calculator. Let's say if we create, let's go ahead and create a float here. We're going to go sum. We're going to initialize it with 0. And we can say then for string argument. This is after, of course, string argument. You've seen this before, right? And we're going to pass in the args. Which args we're passing in is the arguments that we pass in through our main static method here. When we run this application, whatever we pass in, wherever the arguments we pass in through the command line, we want to capture it and put into the argument as a string. And then inside we can do whatever we want. All right. So here we can go ahead and say sum is equal to sum plus, now we're going to do something very interesting here. Probably don't know this, but every argument that we pass through command line here, once we start running this, it's going to be a string. So since we are doing a sum here, this is a float, that's going to be held the summation, the sum of whatever we are putting to the right here. We need to parse, which means we need to interpret or change the type of these strings that we're passing in. So we have to go ahead and say float, right? Because we know it's going to be a float type, dot parse float, and then we pass in our argument. Okay, so what are we saying here again? We say, well, this argument here is going to be of type string. So this argument is getting from this args, right? That we're getting through the command line. So in order for this to actually work, since this is a string, we can't add a string with a number because those are two different types. So we have to make sure that we parse, that we convert this argument, which is a string, into a float. So that way this can actually work. Okay, so outside here, we can say system println, we can say sum is, we can pass our sum rather. Now, if you go ahead and just say run, well, you're just going to say sum, and there is no way for us to input stuff here, right? Which is okay. So what are we going to do here? We're going to go to at the top here, you probably can see it by the top, say in the menu here, we're going to say run, and this drop menu will drop, and we go to run configurations, and we go to the arguments here. So these are program arguments which are going to be passed through our main method here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put 1 space 4 space 5 space 7, and we say run, and we should see 17 because whatever we put those numbers there, the sum is going to be 17. Now let's go ahead and do that again. So let's go run. We're going to say run configurations, arguments. Let's go ahead and say 1, 4, and just put something really weird, a plus sign, a 5, and let's run. We have a problem here, right? Because, well, a plus, it's not a number. That's the reason why we have this number format exception being thrown to let us know that, well, this makes no sense. We can't do this because a plus, it's not a number. So Java Virtual Machine is saying, well, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to throw you this exception to let you know that something is not right. This is bad because if you start thinking, for instance, if you create an application and let's say this was the whole application, you shipped it to your customers, and all of a sudden they make a mistake and they put a plus and this happens. And they have no idea what to do. They're not programmers like you, and naturally that would be a problem. Likely Java has a way for us to catch, per se, these kind of errors. That way the user, when they are using this application, right, they don't see all of this. In other words, that way if errors like this happen, right? They type in an unintended character that is not supposed to be typed, and this doesn't work, they are gracefully told or fails gracefully instead of just throwing things like this, okay? So how do we handle that? Well, there's this thing called try-catch block. What a try-catch block is, it's a way that Java allows us programmers to handle these exceptions. So how do we do that? We say try, and right away we have this boilerplate code here, so we can go enter. And now we have a try and we have a catch. So we are passing the exception class here through our catch, which means inside of here we can actually say system.out.println, and then we can say exception message. And we can append, say E, that's the object that has been, that's a exception type object being passed here. We can say E dot get message, for instance. So that will then, for us, the programmers, we can see exactly what kind of exception, what kind of message this exception is sending out. In this case, if we're going to move where the sum is happening to instead of try. So we're saying here, we're just going to try this because we don't know, the people may have input something wrong. So we're going to try and see what happens. If all is good, then hey, no problem. This is going to happen. Otherwise, we're going to just system out the problem here. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear our running configuration here. Let's apply and run. So sum is 0, perfect. So let's run again. So run configurations. Let's give, for instance, 1% sign 48. And while we're here, let's go ahead and do another system out here. And what we can put, actually message, we can say, so inside here, instead of the, say, argument, go ahead and say this is not a number. That way we know exactly which argument that was entered that decided number. Okay, for now, let's just go ahead and comment that out. So let's go ahead again, run configurations. We're going to go to arguments, and let's say 1, 4, and let's 6x, for instance. Apply, let's run this. So it says 6 is not a number, okay, but it still shows the sum is 5, right? Because if we go here, it got rid of this 6x, right? Because that's not a number, but it considered the 4 and 1 as the numbers that were added. Hence, we have the 5. Now, as you can see, this is much more graceful, right? Because now if I didn't know, for instance, if I wasn't the one who wrote this, I was just the person using this app, okay, this would make sense. Like, oh, I did make a mistake because that's 6x. That makes no sense, right? So at least I'm told, now I know as the user, that the error, something wrong happened. Nevertheless, things still worked. Now, if we go back here, we said here in this catch, because we did try, that's where we try to make sure this is actually valid and works, okay? And then in our exception catch here, we have this exception class that has been passed that we can use to get messages and all of the stuff. Now, this exception is very general. That's just this general class of exception, right? So, however, since we're talking about numbers here, Java has classes that are connected to different types of exceptions. In this case, I would say it's a number issue. The exception should be something like number format exception. So what we can do here, we can say number. The moment you say number, there it is, number format exception. And there we go. Okay. And if we wanted to, we can still do the same because our E here, it's of type number format exception. It will get us a message. Okay, whichever message they have. Let's run one more time. Okay, exception message for input string 6x. So it's telling exactly what the problem is. So as you can see, this is a very important component, especially when it comes to building applications, programming. Because most of the times when you create these applications, there are errors that are not necessarily visible. As you program, you're not going to be able to predict per se what kind of errors are going to be thrown or what the user is going to do as they input data into your application, what kind of data they're going to input. So this is a safe programming tactic that you should always consider, especially when dealing with numbers or sometimes text and many other things you will learn as we progress in our studies here. Okay, so this was a very good intro to try, catch, block. Go ahead and play around with this concept, and I will see you in the next video.